Okay, this week, moving on, I thought we'd have a look at some of the other tools available in Blender, specifically some of the modifiers. A modifier will modify the object you've got, be it your monkey head or your pillow or whatever you have, but it will modify the shapes and do things. But there's a number of modifiers, but we'll go through them one by one. But before we do anything, since we decided we're working in Blender in cycles render, I'm going to change that to default. I haven't done that before, so I'm going to select cycles render here, and I'm going to file and save startup file, which is Control U. Now every time I open Blender, it'll automatically be on cycles render. I'm ready to go. I don't have to worry about that anymore. So anyway, modifiers. Well, before we can modify anything, we need something to modify. So let's add a shape here, or a mesh. So Shift A. Oh, 1 sec. These keys, so you can see what I'm doing. That's down there. That'll be okay. So first thing we need to do is add a mesh subdescription. So let's start with a cylinder. Okay, I'm going to open up my tool menu here with the T key, and I'm going to have nothing for the cap fill, so I've got no geometry on the top or bottom. Okay, we'll stick with the 32 vertices around, that's fine. And if we come across to the modifiers tab and we add a modifier, we see we've got this whole list of modifiers we can use, and each one obviously does a slightly different thing, but today we're going to concentrate on the lattice modifier. Okay, so what is a lattice modifier? Basically, a lattice is an object in Blender. So if I was to Shift A to add an object here, you can see I can add a lattice. So let me add that lattice. You can't see it, but it's actually inside the cylinder there. It seems to come out at 1 meter rather than the default 2 meters for everything else. So let me just scale that up slightly, and there is a lattice, and it's just like an empty cube. It has no geometry because it's not actually a mesh object. The way to think of a lattice modifier is it's a cage, and we can use this cage to influence our mesh. So whenever you're using a lattice modifier, the best thing to do is to size it pretty close to your object, but your object has to be contained within the lattice. So let me select the object here, and the lattice, you can see there's quite a bit of distance there. So I've got the lattice selected. I'm just going to scale it down somewhere about there. My object is contained within the lattice. Okay, now in its simplest form, if I select my object and I add the lattice modifier, I get this modifier window. It's got a couple of options on it, but most importantly, what we have to do is we have to tell this modifier that we're using this lattice. Okay, so we do this here with the object. We go to the object, you see the lattice is already there. If you had several lattices in your scene, I mean, you can name them individually. In fact, let's do that. Let's go back to this lattice modifier. There it is there. I believe we can do this here. Lattice 1. Did it? Okay, let's go back to the object. Go to our modifiers. No, it didn't change there. Okay, select my lattice. I can do it here. Lattice 1. My apologies. Okay, so if I go back to my object, yeah, it's lattice 1. So you can rename your lattices if you've got several. I usually just work one at a time. I haven't had occasion to use several at a time, but who knows. Alright, so object selected, we've got this lattice modifier, and we selected our lattice. We will know if there's something wrong, because if I delete this, you will see that this turns red. This is telling us that we've no lattice selected. Alright, so with that selected, we can come back to the lattice. And what can we do with it? Well, we'll notice a new window up here next to the modifiers, which is actually the lattice properties. But what does it actually do? Well, if I tab into edit mode, you'll see I've got 8 vertices here. If I was to grab one and move it, you can see it is affecting the actual object. Okay, if I was to grab 2 by shift selecting and move, you can see we can start to shape some objects. Okay, right. However, each of these points is called a control point, and this has given us 2 control points on the U. U would be the x-axis, so it's given us that set there and that set there. That should be that and that. 2 on the V, which is the y-axis, so these and these, and 2 on the W, which is the z-axis, which would be the top and bottom. So if I wanted to add more control points on any axis, so let's say the U, I can simply add an extra set of control points. So I've now got 3 sets. And actually the maths is quite simple. 3 times 2 is 6, times 2 is 12, and that will give us 12 control points. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. If I select all of these, it might be easier to see. Anyway, let's go 3 by 3 by 3 for now. So we've got this lattice, and if we grab a control point, now we've got more influence from these end control points. So if I grab this one, it's holding the shape in this area better, because this area is influenced by these. So if I grab that again, it's holding the shape better. So we can actually refine the amount of influence the vertex has on each. Now, quite often what happens, kind of hard to see here, but you can see we've got some interior, it's not geometry, it's some interior lines from the control points. Most of the time, there's not much we can do with these. See, if I'm moving that around, it's not having very much influence on the whole object. Okay, and I don't really want that. If you just want the exterior control points to show, just simply press this outside button. Okay, and those middle points disappear. Now, the one thing about any of the deform modifiers is you need to have sufficient geometry to deform. If I start a new file and I add a cube, mesh cube, and I add a lattice, so shift A, lattice, I scale that lattice up so it's outside the cube. Okay, I come to my lattice properties and I add 3 sets of lines everywhere. Well, let's call it 4. Okay, I come back to my cube, I add a lattice modifier, and this is in red, so I select my lattice. Okay, if I come back to the lattice and tab into edit mode, if I was to pull this point here along the X, shall we say, it's barely influencing it. That's because this cube, on this cube, that's a single face. I need more geometry to be able to smooth out that influence and have more control over it. So while I've got this in edit, I'm just going to press my W key, which is for my specials menu, and I'm going to subdivide it. I'm going to open up my tool shelf here, and I'm going to make the number of cuts 7 or 8. 8 will be fine. Okay, so we'll come back into object mode, select our lattice, tab back into edit mode. Now when I go to pull this, you see it's having a much better influence. It's got the geometry here to be able to use the modifier correctly. Okay, now once again I can see I've got loads of points here from these lines connecting. I don't really want that, so let me come back to this tab and just press outside. Those lines have disappeared. All I'm seeing now is the control points at the front and back and sides. It's just making my view a lot simpler. So we can use this to kind of stretch, bend, shape. We can select one, we can select multiple. If we select all except one, shall we say, you can see how it's influencing the cube there. Right, let's start with a new object. This time I'm going to go back to my cylinder, and there it is. I'm going to open up my tool tab, get rid of the fill type. I'm going to add a lattice. I'm going to scale it up slightly. So let me go into our front view and front ortho. Okay, so I've got a cylinder and a lattice here. Let me just extend the cylinder on the z-axis. So I'm just going to loop select this whole top loop, and I'll do that with Shift, Alt and right click while holding my mouse on the edge there. And let me just bring this up. Probably want it a bit thinner, so I'll select everything by hitting the A key twice, and I want to keep the height but I want to thin it out, so I will scale with the S key and I will press Shift and Z to constrain it to the X and Y, to not use Z. So I'll just thin this out a bit. Okay, so let me go back into object mode. Let's go to that front view again, and let's make the lattice enclose the object. So just bring that up slightly. I'll scale it down to just outside. Bring that down. I can scale this on the Z with the scale commands. ZC. And move this up a little bit more. SC. Somewhere about there. So now my object is enclosed within the lattice. Right, I want to influence this cylinder. So I'll select a cylinder. I'll go to my modifiers tab, select a lattice modifier, and select my lattice as the object. Then I can go back, select my lattice, tab into edit mode, and if I was to grab this, I can kind of influence, okay? But once again, this is affecting the whole lot. I want a bit more control over this. So I'm going to come back, and on my W, which should correspond to the Z-axis, I'm going to increase the number of cuts here. Okay. Right. So, if I was to grab this here and try and move it, it's having no influence. And once again, this is because if I have a look at my cylinder object, there's no geometry running up and down. There's all this whole length is a single face. Okay, so all I'm going to do here is add a few loop cuts. So I'm going to hold my mouse somewhere around here, Control R for the loop cuts, use my scroll wheel to add a few more, somewhere about there, let's say. Okay, and right click to drop it, and right click again. Okay, so let's go back into object mode, select the lattice. Now when I grab this, you can see it's affecting the part of the mesh that I wanted it to. So what can we do here with this? Well, pretty much anything you want, really. Let's say, for example, I box select all of these. Has it picked up the rear ones? It has. And I rotate by 90 degrees, so R90. Okay, you see it's deformed and turn this 90 degrees. I can grab this now and kind of bring it down here. Probably about there. And then these I can sorry, let me grab that. So I'll box select these. Has it grabbed them all? Yes, it has. I can rotate this as well to kind of smooth that out. I can grab that over, and we can start to make shapes. Okay, if I wanted let's say we wanted a bowl in the middle here, I could box select these four, and I can simply scale them, S key. Okay, the bowl's going a bit further than I wanted, so what I could do is select these and these, and I could scale them towards each other on the x-axis. So SX, let's no, it's not X, because we've rotated the object some. Yes, it is X. I just pressed the wrong key. Okay, so we can start to form shapes. This is looking a little lopsided, so let me box select these down here and move these across to try and straighten this up a bit. Okay, and we can start to see we can form any kind of shape we want, really. Right, okay, so let's come back to our lattice. I want to add on this one, sorry, on the B, this extra set of control points here. Now, if I was to select, just say one side of all these control points, sometimes hard to say these, that and that. Let's go to the side view. Is that right? Yes, it is. Okay, and I was to extrude these, nothing happens. If I was to grab these, I can pull this, make more influence. Okay, so that is basically how a lattice modifier works. But what happens when we want to edit our object again? So let's go back to the object mode, let's select our object, and as soon as we tab into edit, we've got our cylinder back. Okay, should have all those selected, because we haven't actually modified the whole the object. We haven't applied the modifier. If we go back to modifiers tab, we'll see we've always got an apply button. Okay, and we haven't done that yet. The minute we do that, the object will take on the shape of the lattice, but you cannot apply a modifier in edit mode. Modifiers cannot be applied in edit mode. Okay, so before I apply that modifier, if you were wanting to do some work here, if we come across here, display modifier in edit mode, if I click this button, you see we've got this ghosting of the shape. Okay, so for example, if I was to, I don't know, just randomly box select a few vertices up here and grab them, editing the basic shape will affect the modifier. Okay, and this final button beside it, which is adjust edit cage to modifier result, means that in edit mode we see it as we see it with the modifier applied. So grabbing this is is going to change the object as we see it. However, because the modifier is applied, this is very, very sensitive. But anyway, that's the general gist of that. So if we're all happy with the way it is, we can come back into object mode. We like the shape we've got, we can simply apply the modifier. Okay, and now we can delete the lattice. So I'll select that, X, delete, the lattice is gone, and we have our shape. Okay, let's start with a new object, and we're going to go back to our monkey. We're going to go back to Suzanne. She's feeling a bit left out lately. So I've just added this basic monkey, and I'm going to add a lattice modifier. So Shift A, add a lattice. Now the lattice has spawned at the 3D cursor, as everything normally does. So let me go back a step with Control Z, and I'm just going to center my 3D cursor with Shift C. Okay, now if I add my lattice modifier, Shift A, add a lattice, there it is. I'm just going to go into this kind of front view. I'm going to scale it up so it's outside. I need to scale it a bit more on the X, so SX. Let's have a look at the side view, probably scale it in a little, SY, just keep it nice and close. Okay, so how perhaps Suzanne. She's got a bit of geometry already, not much, but enough, I suppose. And I have my lattice modifier, so let me add. I have my lattice, not let me add the modifier to it. So with Suzanne selected, add modifier and lattice. I'm going to choose my lattice object. Okay. Right, now I'm going to come back and select my lattice so I can start to kind of change the shape a little. See, it's having a big influence. Okay, and I haven't got enough geometry around here, so I'm going to go to my front view here, select my lattice. I can add some geometry around the effectively the x-axis. And what I'm going to do here, what I'm trying to do, is I want to use the lattice modifier to change your expression a little. I'm going to do the raised eyebrow thing that I usually do, and maybe a few other bits. So I'm making sure that I've got enough of the control points around that they line up with the eyebrow. So that was on the U, or which is the x-axis. Let me turn around to the side view. Again, I'm going to add enough control points so I've got some influence here directly on the eyebrow where I want it. So I'm just scrolling across. That should do there. That's near enough in line there. Let's go front view again, and let's add a couple on the W. Okay. Right. Now you can see clearer here what I mean about all the inside lines, so let's get rid of them, make this a lot simpler. Right, now I want to raise this eyebrow, so I'm looking for the control point that will affect this eyebrow, and it would be not that one there, but the one behind it. So if I look there, that's the nearest point to raising this eyebrow. If I look at the front, that's the one. Okay, so now if I grab this, but you can see it's moving the whole face. It's moving more than the eyebrow. I only want this to influence the eyebrow. So what can I do? Well, I can go back into object mode and select my monkey again and go to edit mode, and I can select these few vertices around the eyebrow that I wanted to influence. Okay, so I've got 6 here selected, and if I go to the object data here and vertex groups, you see I've got some vertex selected. I can add a vertex group, so let me just add that. It comes up as group. I can rename that. Let's call it eyebrow, and this will be easier to find later. Okay, with this selected, the new name, let's just press assign. Okay, now let's go back to lattice. Let's go into edit mode with it, and you can see here in the lattice properties we've got some vertex groups, and that's actually not what I wanted. I'm sorry, ignore that. In the lattice properties here, we've got this group of dots here which represent vertex. This is actually the symbol for a vertex group. So if I press here, that vertex group hasn't shown up. Why? Let me just go back and check. Edit mode, vertex groups, that's there. It's a sign. So that's the eyebrow. Let's come back to modifier. I know what I did wrong. Stupid me. Select this again, Suzanne, and we'll go back to the modifier, not the actual lattice properties, and we've got the vertex group again here. So if I select this vertex group, I can select the eyebrow, and this means that this lattice will only affect that group of vertices that we designated as the eyebrow. So let me select the lattice again. I don't want to add a modifier. What am I doing? I want to edit it. Tab edit. Okay, this vertex is selected still. Now if I grab this, you'll see it's only affecting those vertices that I put into that vertex group. So I can kind of make a scale. Oh not scale, razor eyebrow. Okay, if I was to choose any other control point here, it's having no effect because we have that vertex group. Okay, so let me raise this eyebrow quite a bit. I know this is exaggerated. Now I want to do something down this mouth area and chin, but I've already got this vertex group locked in. So what can I do? I can tap back to object mode, I can come back to my monkey, and I can apply this modifier. Okay. Now because I've still got the lattice, I can still use it with a different vertex group. Alright, so let me add a lattice modifier again. Let me select the same lattice. Okay, this is pulled up because I still had this influence on there. If I had this down, it would have been a bit better. So let's just kind of pull her down a bit, where she was, somewhere about there, I think. But anyway, the modifier is now controlling the whole object. So now, if, for example, I wanted to stretch her chin down a bit, I could box select these vertices here and start to pull it down. I could also do what I did before, which is select my object, go into edit mode, go into one. Let's turn on the background geometry so we see what I'm doing here. Deselect the eyebrows, and I can box select these, come back to my data tab, and I can add a new group. So let's add new, and let's double click on this to rename it mouth and assign it. Back to object, select our lattice. We can now select the, no, not to lattice, back to the object, and it's a modifier. Get this right. We can now select the mouth group. Okay, so when we edit the lattice, let's just say with this few down here, it's now only affecting those vertices. It's pulling these vertices down. It's not affecting the rest of them. So that is, in essence, what a lattice modifier is. It's basically a cage you build around your object to modify the shape of it and kind of pull and push it and get what you want from it.